Good evening, everyone. Today, I'll be introducing you to the course on climate change and human rights. This particular course is offered by UNCC eLearn. It's a group of UN organizations together. They have created this online MOOC for the benefit of everyone so that everybody could get updated on this important issue of climate change and human rights. I'll share the screen here. So, as I have already told about how to log in and all that, I hope you know from UNCC Learn. Once you log in, you will get you will log in into your account. From there, once you have chosen this course, an introduction to climate change and human rights, then you will get this window. So this particular course has again videos, then text and documents, some PDF documents, and most importantly, quiz. Only when you attempt the quiz and get 70% marks, then you will get a certificate directly from offered by UN. This particular course, it is offered by United Nations Climate Change Committee on Capacity Building, then United Nations Human Rights, and UNFCCC, and GAZ. So this is the German government. Here in this particular course, there are 7 modules. So in the 7 modules, first module is on human rights, impacts of climate change and corresponding human rights obligations, human rights in climate negotiations, agreements and actions, climate change in human rights processes, agreements and action, persons, groups and people in vulnerable situations, regional and national frameworks and action, and Module 6, rights-based climate litigation, Module 7, right to development and climate change in focus. The biggest challenge that we are facing globally has that is climate change, which has impacts on every sector and also on human beings. So again, it is not impacting everyone equally. Those who are responsible for higher emissions and those who have least contributed to this global warming and climate change, even they are impacted. So the human rights aspect comes into focus when there is distress, migrations, poverty, rehabilitation, including gender and children. So there are so many issues that inequity that is existing and the gaps that have increased between people, between haves and have-nots. All these things are part of this particular course. And coming to this module 1, here is module 1 consists of an introduction to human rights and climate change, an overview of the human rights impacts of climate change, and the corresponding human rights obligations. So at the end of this module, you have the quiz and learning objectives. Here you would learn identify the relationship between climate change and human rights, describe the direct and indirect impacts of climate change on human rights, highlight the human rights obligations of both state and non-state actors arising in relation to climate change, access to remedy and accountability of state and non-state actors, recognize the value of a human rights-based approach to climate change. So these are the various learnings. Actually, this whole course is only 3.5 hours. So each module again they have given how much time does it take. Like this module takes around 25 minutes to complete. One has to go through. I'm only giving you an overview and how to attempt the quiz and introducing you to this thing. So some of the best materials are available here. So this currently this is one of the biggest crisis within which desertification, rise in sea levels, ocean acidification, and the turbulent weather patterns. So many things are happening, and there are changes in the atmosphere and ocean system. Especially the greenhouse gases have increased, which includes carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. All this because of we know where human beings are mostly responsible due to burning of fossil fuels, industrialization, industrial agriculture, land use change, and the use of energy. And overall, the population growth is also one of the causes. The science is very clear about this global warming, and we have the trends, we have models, and we know the impacts, and we also know the scenarios of the future. If you go with this current model of development, what would happen? Or if you adopt better technologies, what would happen? Or if you mitigate, what would happen? So, but all these trends that are happening currently are pointing towards the worst because we acted very less. And we have Paris Agreement where maximum number of countries have agreed to do something. So here we also have nationally determined contributions. The monitoring aspects are there. We want to keep below 1.5 or we might let it go up to 2 degrees. But with the current trend, by 2100, it could be even 6 degrees increase in temperature as compared to pre-industrial levels. So here we have the what is Paris Agreement and about the details. So human rights in the era of climate change. So human right is inherent as we all are born on this earth and we have the right to live, exist, including our constitution gives so many rights. Within that right to life is important thing. So whether it is regardless of nationality, place of residence, sex, ethnic color, religion, everything, disabilities, we all have human rights. As we have other rights also, like civil, political, and many other. So these rights are essential, and we have many laws and treaties relevant to human rights, like Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, international covenant on economic, social, and cultural rights, and other instruments. They are there. And human rights are universal. And human rights obligations and climate change. Rights holders and duty bearers in relation to climate change. We also have duties, not only the rights. So here, who are the rights holders and who are the duty bearers? The duty bearers include the international organizations, individuals, governments. So there is a mandate basically for us, for all of us. State obligations to address the human rights implications of climate change. Even states need to act. So here, states with respect to human rights entail a duty to respect human rights, a duty to protect human rights against violations by third parties, and a duty to fulfill human rights. And there are some more additional resources in this context of Module 1. You can go through. Here we have quiz. So here these are not counted actually, but they use certain to check your knowledge. So you can, even if you are wrong, it doesn't matter, you submit. Then you will go to the quiz. Anyhow, I given you these quiz model questions and answers. You can go through them. They would ask similar questions and answers. So you can attempt to get your certificate. So passing is not an issue, which always I tell you. You tell somebody that I have qualified this climate change and human rights course, and if they ask you something, that is your responsibility. Your certificate will not help you at that time because you need to respond. So it means you should have knowledge, retained knowledge and understanding. This particular module introduces you to the incorporation of human rights in global climate change negotiations, understanding negotiations, agreements, and action. I will just switch off my. Uh, there is a power failure at my end, so I'll just switch off my video so that it doesn't take consume much of my here. Hope hope you are able to see this page on module 2. Sorry for that. This module 2 here you would learn about how human rights have been discussed in climate negotiations and to describe how climate agreements such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, they would address human rights concerns and discuss strategies that can be used to integrate human rights in climate action. Again, this is about 25 minutes you can learn. So incorporating human rights in climate change negotiations. The negotiation and outcome of international climate change instruments has been based on the understanding of climate change as a global environmental challenge. However, the scientific evidence that climate change is linked to human activities and causes human rights harms necessitates a human rights based approach to addressing climate change and preventing these harms. So here, like strategies utilized to influence climate negotiations have included the publishing of open letters calling for the inclusion of human rights in climate agreements. So it happened in 2015, Geneva Pledge on Human Rights in Climate Action. Then again, United Nations Human Rights Council is there, has passed multiple resolutions. And because climate change is one subject which cuts across all disciplines and all sections of society. Wherever you live on this earth, the people would be impacted in various ways. So that's why climate change and human rights are very much related. It cuts across the national boundaries, basically. The impacts are global and they are very, very intense and huge because code red for humanity. It's what declared by UN recently after sixth assessment report release. So here, then the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was adopted in 92, it also brings about social dimensions of climate change to justice. And this human rights in climate change decisions, that is also after the Paris Agreement. So here we can see other who are the constituted bodies in this regard. Paris Committee on Capacity Building. This is one of the sponsoring organization of this group also. The Gender and Action Plan, local communities and indigenous people. Then Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage. This was very much discussed in the recent COP27, and this is ongoing. We have seen recently, like the floods in Pakistan. It was a huge damage. So loss and damage came into existence, and it is in the process of being adopted and compensated. Action for climate empowerment, like that, we have different groups. So human rights in climate action. So we have this nationally determined contribution. So each country, how much contributions from which sector they're coming, and how do we monitor, and how do we have this mitigation and adaptation action. So all this would also address the human rights. So NDCs, it's an ongoing process, and where everybody is involved, different stakeholders. So reference to human rights should be included where it is written. So the National Adaptation Plan, this is also an important thing. So national adaptation plans, all countries have not adopted, but some countries have adopted, and still many countries need to adopt. Some examples are also given, like good practices. So in Marshall Islands, what happened? If you click on this, you would know. So the Marshall Islands is one of the countries whose incorporation of human rights in NDCs has evolved into a good practice. So it's a case study. So it then expanded on its commitment to human rights-based climate action in its second NDC. So like that, what they have done, we could learn. So it's a good thing. So we can learn from others' examples. So some are reference materials are given here. Then you can go to quiz. So this is a basic question they would ask, but once submitting, you'll get into the final quiz. Then module 3 is on climate change in human rights processes, agreements, and action. So what will you learn here? So again, this introduces you to the incorporation of climate change and human rights process, agreements, and action. It briefly highlights key climate change considerations in human rights action and builds understanding on how climate change considerations are reflected in the decisions and work of rights mechanisms. So here learning objectives are on discuss how climate change has been reflected in human rights processes, agreements, and actions. Outline how human rights mechanisms have attempted to address climate change concerns. Describe the entities involved in incorporating climate change in human rights actions and the strategies they have used. Then climate change in human rights processes, agreements, and uh, human rights agreements and action. So this has come, the current human rights framework has come a result of intense negotiations and compromise that came from the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Subsequent international human rights instruments covering civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights of various human rights. Then here, United Nations Human Rights Council is the principal UN intergovernmental body composed of 47 member states responsible for promoting and protecting human rights around the world. As part of its work on human rights and the environment, the Council has addressed the issue of the impact of climate change on human rights. So this council is very important. So what it does. And in 2008, what happened? Expressed concern that climate change poses an immediate and far-reaching threat to people and communities around the world. This resolution was passed. Another resolution, climate change related impacts have a range of implications, both direct and indirect. And here will be felt most acutely by those segments of the population who are already in a vulnerable situation. So the challenge is, say, for the remote indigenous communities or the poor communities or the, say, gender within that, especially women and children. So like that, this human rights impact across people also will be diverse. And all these resolutions are there, details are given. The human rights treaty bodies, you can go through these videos, it will be explained by experts very well. There are 10 human rights treaty bodies that monitor implementation of the core international human rights treaties. So here it is explained in this particular video. So you can go through that video to learn more. So like here you can go through these main bodies that have linked climate change to their work. The Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So by clicking this, you can go through the details, what is it, and Human Rights Committee, another one. Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, Committee on the Rights of the Child, Committee on Migrant Workers, Committee on the Rights of Persons and Disabilities. So like that, we have different committees. The United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. This is another important office. So this has incorporated climate in its human rights works. So this is advocating for a human rights-based approach to climate action. So again, is also involved in collaboration with partners. And they also included in environmental laws and policies. and support for inclusion of civil society in environmental decision making, like that. Then national human rights institutions. So national human rights, they also play. Each country has this human rights wings. Otherwise, some non-government organizations are also working on human rights. Of course, judiciary is the top supporting institution. Law-making bodies or all other like police or military. All these personnel also are involved, directly involved. So national human rights institutions aid in promotion and protection of human rights within their respective jurisdictions through handling complaints and conducting investigations, conducting research, raising awareness. So like that, they have a very big mandate. And here, through the national institutions and regional mechanism sections, support the establishment and strengthening of NHRs. And they also include Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, network of national human rights institutions in Africa. So regional groups are also there. So again, these are other things, details given. Then climate change and human rights joint action. The different human rights and climate change entities cooperate and undertake joint action to ensure that the climate action incorporates human rights in various ways. So by clicking here, we can know some case studies actually. So like joint action, joint statements of human rights treaty bodies, joint statements of special procedures mandate holders, like set reports of special procedure mandate, and capacity building programs like that. So there are some more additional resources, and you can go to this and you can attempt. And module 4. This module 4 again it is on provides an introduction to the disproportionate impacts of climate change on persons, groups, and peoples in vulnerable situations, such as women, children, future generations, indigenous people, environmental human rights defenders, migrants, people with persons with disabilities, older persons, and the poor, and highlights considerations made in international processes also. So you would learn on all these sections of the societies. So these persons, groups, and people in marginal situation, who are they? So they, like some people, more likely to be harmed by climate change than others. So like we have wealth, education, ethnicity, religion, gender, age, class, disability, race. All these things can contribute to differential exposure and impact of individuals or societies to climate hazards. And already vulnerable means people who have been subject to historic and systemic uh, discrimination and are who are socially, economically, culturally, politically, institutionally, otherwise marginalized are often especially affected with climate change. Mean they are more susceptible or vulnerable to potential harm and possesses fewer resources to adopt. So that's the challenge. So everybody is not equal per se in this on this earth. So climate change would have variable impacts. So here we have, say, for example, a group Article 9 of the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation and Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's a called Escazú Agreement, which entered into force on April 2021. So it shall guarantee a safe and enabling environment for persons, groups, and organizations that promote and defend human rights in environmental matters so that they are able to act free from threat, restrictions, and insecurity. So like that, we have different agreements. And let us say, for instance, people and communities who depend more on nature for their livelihoods are in particular risk in the context of biodiversity and ecosystem service loss due to climate change. And the recognition of persons, groups, and people in vulnerable situations in international frameworks and processes. So in 2000, by 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, no one will be left behind and to endeavor to reach the farthest behind first. So there are 17 goals. So this is what they said. So it is like on par protecting everyone. And this commitment to leave no one behind is also reflected in climate change agreements. Of course, we are far behind in achieving these sustainable development goals, and we hardly have 8 years time. 2023 we are entering already. So we have big challenge. And the Paris Agreement especially recognizes the disproportionate impacts of climate change on, say, indigenous people, local communities, migrants, children, persons with disabilities, people in vulnerable situations, and women, and developing country parties, especially those that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change, and those who are in the least developed countries or small island developing states, like that. So women and gender is within this response to climate action. This is a very big subject. Otherwise, we have so much challenges and but here gender action plan with regards to climate change that we developed under UNFCCC, and it highlighted the obligation of parties to fulfill human rights and promote gender equality under the Paris Agreement. So, because climate change affects women and men in different ways, is very important. And pandemics like COVID-19, it has increased this inequality even more. So there are so many already existing challenges, and here, in addition, women environmental human rights defenders who are both female and human rights defenders. For them also, it is a issue. Those who are working for women, and even they are at risk. What to do? Right to health, like that. All things are given. Access to energy for women. What to do? Right to food, right to water, right to participation. Gender mainstreaming is very important. Gender responsive climate action is also required. Again, women building resistance to climate change disaster in Africa. A video is there. So we have this gender action plan. General recommendations are given in number 37. These are part of gender responsive climate action actually. Study on gender responsive climate action. OSCHR gender responsive climate action statement that's given there. And children, this is another vulnerable group. They constitute majority, and the impacts on children are very huge, you know, given the present conditions. So we had another course, climate change and children, that most of you have qualified. From there also you have learned a lot about the impacts of climate change and children. Those who are not done do that course, then you would learn a lot. You observe what is happening actually here. Only when I complete this page, there is a tick. Remember that. It means you need to go through all the pages to get a tick. Only then you can appear for quiz, and only then you will get a certificate. If these things you have missed, they're not browsed through, then you won't get a certificate. So remember that. So it has not turned like tick, blue color tick here. So as I am browsing, you can see it is going like this and then completing. Once it is completed, only then the tick comes. Okay, you might be a fast reader or from your experience, understanding, but still you have to complete this whole page to appear at the quiz and to get download your certificate. And indigenous people is another thing, and mostly indigenous people are remote, and development is not much. Their carbon footprint is always low, but still they became the victims. And they mostly depend on natural resources. And in climate change, especially those dependent on forestry, fisheries, like that, some of the nature-based livelihoods, they are impacted a lot, like water due to floods or drought, something like that. So indigenous peoples as part of the solution to uh, climate change. So here we need to look how the effects of climate change on indigenous people. We could go through this video to understand. And they also should become part of the decision making. So there are some special reports on climate change and land where this aspect has been covered. So again, we have indigenous peoples and local communities portal. So you could go through this in detail. And migrants and people on the move in the context of climate change. We are already seeing the climate change related migration. The people from Syria or even in Afghanistan due to drought, people were migrating. I myself was part of a particular study in Herat, Pasto Jarga, that area. People are migrating not because of insecurity or uncertainties and other security reasons, but due to drought they were migrating in huge numbers. Drought was induced by climate change. So this climate change is an increasingly important driver for human mobility, and we know with migration how much vulnerability of the communities will be there. So you could learn a lot about this migrant workers and members and their families. 1951 Refugee Convention, UN Guiding Principles for International Internal Displacement, Global Compact for Sail or Orderly and Regular Migration. And especially recently, sorry, post-COVID times, the many countries are not welcoming the migrants because already the countries are in a vulnerable situation because of global recession, then getting into depression, and there are so many challenges for governments, the debt of the nations, or not having access to energy, especially in some countries, the prices of energy is growing. Like that, we have many challenges. So, whether the displacement is internal or across. So we have this IPCC reports also. So a human rights-based approach to migration, and we have the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. Again, especially the loss of life need to be reduced due to disasters. So climate-induced disasters are growing like anything, say cyclones or storm surge or yeah. Somebody please mute yourself. Hine Krishna.
Sir,
No, please mute yourself. Some sound is coming. Yeah, thank you. So, empowering migrants affected by climate change to contribute to and benefit from climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts will require closing human rights protection gaps and ensuring their access to information, decision-making process, and justice. So, we have some resolutions in this regard on migration and migrants. And also we have global platform for disaster risk reduction. That is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction also there. Okay, COP task force on displacement is also there under the UNFCCC. And persons with disabilities. This is another big thing. Globally, we have many challenges already for them. And older people is another big area. So you can go through these additional resources given here. The links are there, material and links, including websites. And here is the quiz. So module 5 is on regional and national frameworks and action, basically. So in this particular thing, to identify how climate change is addressed through regional human rights frameworks, explain the link between regional human rights frameworks and national human rights action in addressing climate change issues, define roles of different actors involved in human rights based climate action at the regional and national level. So this is again 25 minutes to complete. So here regional human rights systems, how they are there and what are those systems. So in each region we have actually, say it is on Americans, Africans, Arab states, Asia, Europe, like that. Then regional human rights systems in Europe, what are they? Like European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, European Social Charter, Convention of Access to Information, Public Participation in Decision Making, and Access to Justice in Voluntary Matters, like that. And European Court of Human Rights. There are so many things. You have to just remember some of these important things which we think you they would asking the quiz. So here by going into details, we can again know different aspects that are there in Europe related to human rights. So you can go through them. Maybe you can, based on your geographical location, you can go through more about your own geography. Like this is related to Americans because we represent Asia. Most of you are attending this course. So Africa, you can learn. But in detail, you can go through this because emerging human rights system, the Asia Pacific region. So here, like Pacific Island Forum Secretariat has been formed, and the National Ocean Plan, ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. I was there recently attending this ASEAN meeting on the blue economy. This group association for Southeast Asian nations. So Southeast Asian countries are part of this actually. So national action. So within each country, the nation may the role of states or as a country, what is happening in the context of human rights. So in each state also we have a particular legal entity which protects the human rights. Of course, as I said, judiciary is one of the important. The constitution provides you all that. So each country has some human rights. So here this is a video we can go through an introduction to climate change and human rights. So judiciary, as I said, that's very important. I said civil society is also there, and media, press, everybody, they also work. So civil society organizations like Amnesty International, many organizations are there. Then human rights defenders, even from individual to organizations too. So some examples are given here. We have additional resources in this regard, and then the quiz. So here module 6 is on the highlights on the rights of the holders to hold duty payers accountable for climate change and the protection of human rights. So here it is on the key objectives of climate change litigation. Then describe current trends in climate change litigation. Outline how human rights have been applied to seek redress for climate harms. So these things are there in this particular thing. Climate litigation, all persons have the right to effective remedy. Rights holders may pursue judicial or other appropriate remedies at both the national and international level for alleged violations of the human rights. Okay, then civil society organizations, how they are protecting trends in climate litigation. Like loss and damage is one recent thing which is being adopted during the discussed very much during the COP27. So human rights in climate litigation. So here, like the citizens and non-government organizations are increasingly taking legal action to hold states and business enterprises accountable for their climate actions and omissions in many instances. So these are happening already. So all over the globe, we are seeing such kind of thing. So in this, the judiciary plays an important role, and we have some cases like indigenous peoples and litigation. So Inter-American Commission on Human Rights seeking relief from violations resulting from global warming caused by acts and omissions of the United States of America. So the Inuit petition is one such example. So like that we have this thing they ask in quiz, so we have to remember what is Inuit petition. And another case in the Pakistan. So in Australia, and states' obligations to mitigate climate change. Like Uganda Foundation versus Kingdom of the Netherlands. So we have, you can go through these videos. Then corporate responsibilities for climate change. So Greenpeace, South East Asia and others, we are also making those corporates responsible for their carbon contributions. So we have many such examples. So that's why by doing these kind of courses, you would have a global consciousness of what is happening around the globe also. That's very good. Most of your textbooks, you might be learning local, regional, or national level, but this kind of international courses will give you an exposure. And climate change, migration, and litigation. So again, some cases are given here. And you have additional resources, and then the quiz. Then here, uh, right to development and climate change in focus. So in this particular module, you would learn where right to development, its key features, identify key actors, laws, and the policies relating to climate change and the right to development, illustrate the linkage between climate change and the right to development, including the obstacles climate change poses us to realization of the right to development. So then explain human rights obligations related to the right to development in the context of international cooperation to address climate change. Then you can go through this right to development, rights holders and duty bearers. So these aspects are also given. So key elements of the right to development include people-centered development, a human rights-based approach. That is, the declaration requires that development be carried out in a manner in which all human rights and fundamental freedoms can be fully realized. And participation, equity, non-discrimination, self-determination, international cooperation, solidarity. So there are so many things under this, under right to development. So again here, climate change and the declaration of the right to development. Here we have this video from Mozambique. The climate change threatens the full and effective enjoyment of a range of human rights, including the right to development. So the declaration of the right to development and climate change is there, which tells on the preserve the sovereignty of states over the natural resources and confers on human beings an inalienable human right to enjoy economic, social, like that. And development must be inclusive and climate informed, paying special attention to the needs of persons, groups, and people in vulnerable situations, including those who are often marginalized, like that. And the right to development in the Paris Agreement, there also it is given. So this is because endorsed by almost all countries, so they need to follow. And then different substantive provisions in the Paris Agreement reflect the key elements of the right to development, say mitigation, under which article, what is said, then adaptation, then loss and damage, equity, common but differentiated responsibilities. All these are there. And climate change in the global development agenda. So combating climate change is a key global development priority through the declaration of the right to development does not have an express focus on the environment. Environment is a key facet of the right to development. So we can learn principle 3, what it says of the Rio Declaration, like that. International cooperation, climate change, and the right to development. So, say when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lawyer. If you have cooperation, networking, and all that, even which comes under sustainable development goal, organizations, institutions, networking, all that. So global challenges such as environmental degradation and climate change require concerted global efforts to resolve them. So we have to work together. We have to share technologies. solutions and also support the international cooperation in climate action, intergovernment panel on climate change. It is there. So that they provide reports. So thousands of pages of reports they come. So we have the sixth assessment report now, within which all these things are explained. The Kyoto Protocol, the CDM mechanism, was a good initiative to share technologies and support Annex A, Annex B countries, means those who are polluting and those who are polluted, means from greenhouse gases, and those are impacted by climate change. So there was a support, so like per ton of carbon dioxide emission, mitigation or adaptation. There was fund. So it was mostly on mitigation, basically Kyoto, but adaptation was also there to reduce greenhouse gases, especially. And of course, it was a good initiative. Then it was given up later because ultimately the emissions were not coming down. So many people joined under Kyoto. They claimed they implemented, but emissions have not come down much. So that's why the key actors in integrating to development in climate action, the state actors are very, very important. The country level governance and governance and respecting institutions. So they had to create these conditions and systems and formulate appropriate national development policies that aim at the constant improvement of the well-being of the entire population and of all individuals. So states are obliged to work together also. So states have different obligations. So here, non-state actors are also there. So here, organizations, relevant actors and organs of society, including private sector and civil society. So they are non-state actors. So they can also contribute and implement. So civil society, private sector, cities, it's there. And you have this additional resources and we have summary. So the seventh module, we don't have the quiz actually. So once you attempt all these quizzes up to sixth module, then at the end of this, once you complete this uh, reading and attempting, now let me stop sharing the screen and I'll get back to this module course. I'll share. Hope you are seeing this. So here, once I have completed this course, I'm telling you at the end, once you complete the quiz and everything within your profile, uh, so here you can go to your certificates. And after completion, like you see, an introduction to climate change and human rights. So I completed this course on 26 November and time is also given. And I can download this certificate and you can see the certificate of completion. This will be issued like this to you on your name because my name is longer, so it got into second row. Here it is written, has successfully completed the online course, An Introduction to Climate Change and Human Rights on November 2022. It's given, and this certificate you would get. It is worth and it has its value. So after completing this, you will get this certificate. So, but I have given actually shared already some of the questions. Srikant would share again the quiz related guidance questions and some answers. So you can go through them for attempting your own quizzes. It's only for your guidance, I'm telling. So that's how you can complete this course. Yeah. If I hope with this course, this video recording will also be shared. Those who have joined late, don't worry, you can go through this through video again and understand. And I am confident that most of you would complete this course within 3.5 hours. Within, because 3.5 hours is the time given for this course officially also. So just sit down and complete. Yeah, thank you very much to everyone. And if there are any questions, very fundamental, I would take. Not related to subject, because subject you have to go through yourself again. I only introduce you to this course, but details you have to go through again. Yeah, I can take about 2-3 questions if there is something. Otherwise, we can close. Can unmute and ask. Professor Galana sir is talking, I think, but his mic is muted. You can unmute and.
Okay, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Okay, sir. It is good, sir. No problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Then, without wasting your time, I'll close, and I want to see all your certificates in the groups. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Okay, sir.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.